let's see. I've got a ghost story. Sort of a ghost story.
Almost a ghost story. Look, that's like being almost pregnant. Either you're a spirit or you're a physical entity. It's one or the other.
Well, I'll explain it and go from there.
All right, then maybe I can tell you.
I was up at Yosemite, National Park in California.
Yes.
And doing a Ouija board.
Here we go.
There were, I guess, about 10 or 12 people in the room. There was only 2 of us on the board. The other people were, standing around watching, contributing their energy. And we got something that came across as being, negative. I don't necessarily want to say evil, but definitely negative-oriented.
Do you want to tell us what it was?
Well, it wouldn't give us a name, but the impression that I have was that it was something higher up than just an ordinary demon. It was very strong, very intelligent.
Now, was this manifesting itself simply through moving on the Ouija board and spelling things out, or was
That's the way it started.
Okay.
We were, asking questions of it. At first we didn't know that it was evil, but, having done the Ouija board for several years prior to that, we've learned to ask appropriate questions to determine whether it's a positive or a negative entity. And after having determined that it was a negative entity, we were going to stop, but the rest of the people in the room wanted to continue because they were fascinated. So we went ahead and continued with it, which of course was our mistake. But after a while, it told us to turn the lights off.
Oh, so, it did, and you listened, right?
Yeah, we turned the lights off. We turned the candle on.
All right, I'll tell you.
Lit a candle.
Lit a candle. I'll tell you what. I'm coming up on a break. I want you to hold this story for the break. All right?
Okay.
All right, stay right where you are. Back now to our story, and I'm sorry we interrupted you, sir. You're back on the air again.
Oh, no problem. Let's see, where was I? It asked us to turn the lights off, so we lit a candle, and we did turn the lights off.
Bad move.
Yeah, well, we found that out the hard way. We continued, speaking with it for about a minute or so. Unbeknownst to us, back behind the group, towards the corner of a room, a light started to form, just in the middle of the air. It started off real small, but it was real bright. It was actually lighting up the room.
Right.
The room got real cold, real fast. There was no bad smell or anything, but it was quite cold all of a sudden.
That'd be enough for me. Now, what I want to know, first of all, before you continue is, I'd be out of there. I mean, in a flash, I'd be out of there. Light begins to form where there ought not be light. The room gets cold. That'd be all I'd need.
Since my friend and I had been doing it for, on a semi-regular basis for a couple of years, we were fairly fluent, at least up to that point. We hadn't, gotten anything that strong before, but, we pretty much knew how to, deal with it once it got to that point. My friend started getting sick to his stomach. I started, getting a little bit of a headache. So we stopped, with the board itself and basically moved back away, relaxed ourselves, started saying some prayers, at least I started imagining a golden light around myself, which is what I consider a protective light, and went from there, and we just left the board alone, and the light did fade. We turned on the room lights itself, and the light just faded out. And
well, that's good. There are a lot of people who would say to you, you should have been praying in the first place, not messing around with the Ouija board.
Well,
because you know what can happen, sir?
Oh yeah, I know
you can bring something like that into this world or across from wherever it comes from, and you can put your Ouija board away, and it won't matter because it's in.
Right. Yeah. Once it's done its full transformation, crossover. Yeah. But we managed to stop it in time.
So what would you advise people out there about Ouija boards?
Well, first of all, there are several good books out there. If you're really determined to use one, read the books on it first. The best thing to do is to, one of the most common questions, if you get a negative-oriented spirit, one of the most common questions that it will ask is, can I come in? And never think that it's referring to coming into the room or into your home or whatever. When it's asking that question, it's wanting to come into you. And you always say no. And if you get a question like that, I would suggest that you stop and don't mess with it anymore.
Okie dokie. Thank you very much for the call. There are many out there who probably ought not mess around with this kind of thing at all. It's very serious. It's not a joke. A Ouija board is simply an instrument, in my opinion. Now, it may be a particularly powerful instrument, but you can invite these sorts of forces in with or without a Ouija board. And my advice to you is, don't do it. Like an unwelcome in-law coming to visit, it might not leave.
Hi, Art.
Hi.
I'm calling from Merced, KYOS.
Yes, indeed.
And mine's very short, and I don't know if it was a ghost or a real person, but I was up in the Santa Cruz Mountains in a Volkswagen in 1970 somewhere, and with my friend, and we were coming back from a place up in the Santa Cruz Mountain called the Chateau Liberté.
Yes.
And anyway, we're coming down these mountains, and they're all curvy and everything, and as we came down...
Probably Route 17, wasn't it?
Yeah, matter of fact.
I know the road.
Oh, right, great. Well, then it's all rocky at some areas on the side with all it's all green and all that and trees but anyway, it's a 2-lane road, right? And we're coming along, and it's down one of the downhill ways, and there's this, we come in, and we're kind of talking, a couple girls, and we're talking, and there's this man lying in the road on our side of the road, and he's lying in the road with his head on the white line, and he has on a suit that's like kind of checkered. It's not a normal suit, but it's a suit.
Right.
And we just notice it very quickly. It's a checkered suit, and he's just lying there, and we dodge him at the last moment, and that's all we ever saw of him. It was just a dodge of this man, but he was lying there, and he was smiling. He wasn't dead. He wasn't squished or anything. He was just lying in the road, and we looked back, and we didn't, you couldn't see in the dark, but he wasn't, there wasn't a grimace on his face or any pain or anything. He was just lying in the middle of the road.
Well, you lie on the white line long enough, and you will be squished.
Well, absolutely. But there was like headlights way in the distance behind us, and they didn't make a swerve or anything, so we didn't know. And one other really quick thing is my mother grew up in the hills of Virginia, and she told me lots of stories. They had many sisters, and 7 sisters. Anyway, they were coming home one night, and their mother through the woods, if you can imagine coming home through the woods at night, but they did it all the time then. And at any rate, they came in, and they were supposed to get home before dark, and they didn't. And there was a little creek-like thing that they had to jump over, and it was small enough to jump over. But when they jumped over, it was dark, and they were afraid of getting wet and getting in trouble. And as they jumped over, a match lit underneath of them out of the middle of the water. Yeah, there are many stories like that from them.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, take care. The one about the road, 17 is a rough highway. It's like Highway 1 in a lot of ways, though inland. And then there's Blood Alley up in San Jose. Roads where a lot of people have been killed tend to be roads that are haunted. It's not really a reach to understand why. People died there. Spirits, energy, linger on those roads. It's just the way it is. You don't believe? That's fine. But it is true, you know.
Well, hello, Art.
Hello.
Scott from Graham, Washington.
Hello, Scott.
And this is something that happened over on the west side of the Olympic Mountains.
Yes, sir.
And it's up the Queets River. Anyway, we were, there was 4 of us, and we had 2 pickup trucks and 1 camper on 1 truck. And we went up to this beautiful spot with the river, and on the other side of the river is a cliff with these just huge boulders, probably 5 to 1,000-pound boulders.
Big
just
rocks.
huge.
Big rocks.
Big rocks. And so we got up there, and it was dusk, and when it's dark up there, I mean, it is dark. I mean, you can't even see your hand in front of your face.
Understood.
And so we decided to sit all in one camper and have a good old poker game.
Mm-hmm.
So we were all sitting around playing poker, and it was about 1:30 a.m., and we heard some splashes in the river, and we heard some grunts.
Grunts.
Yeah, just kind of huge grunts. So we figured it was probably a bear out there having fun in the river, you know.
Don't like grunts.
Yeah, and so after a while, the grunts seemed to get louder, and we heard like big rocks hitting each other. You know how you can hear the crack of rocks?
Of course.
And after a while, these rocks seemed to get closer and closer to our camper. And you could feel the rocks hit the ground outside to kind of a big thud. And I'm telling you, we all looked at each other and we said, nobody's going outside. I mean, we were armed to the teeth, but we were scared to death.
I wouldn't. You mean like those gigantic rocks, you know, coming out of the air and hitting the ground like that?
Yes. It's just like
bad.
somebody was over there throwing these huge rocks.
Uh-huh.
And then, you know, I wanted to call you last week about the Sasquatch sounds because you wouldn't believe this. I mean, the hair on the back of our necks was standing up. It's standing up now.
Was it like the sound I've got?
It was close, but not really. I mean,
we're closer to the first one that Linda Howe sent or the second one?
The second one.
That,
and
you
these
mean
sounds,
that absolutely horrible, it was I don't know what I would call that. I would call that, it almost sounds human. To me, it sounded like a man in horrible, horrible agony. That's the only way I can think to put it. Is that about the way it sounded?
Oh, you wouldn't believe it, Art. It was just about like that, and it was echoing up and down the river, and it was terrible. We were terrified, and these rocks you could almost hear them whistling through the air, and they were crashing on the other side of our camper. They were hitting in the water, and the cracking of the rocks, and this went on, Art, for 3 hours. And we were
What do you guys
scared.
do? You just sit there and sort of shake at the table, or what?
We're on the floor of the camper. We just couldn't move. We didn't know if one of these rocks are going to hit us.
Now, you see, that sounds realistic to me. That's where I'd be, floor of the camper. You betcha.
And we were armed to the teeth, let me tell you. And I was ready for anything. And this went on for 3 hours, and it was about like 4:30 in the morning, and the sun started coming up. And we're all looking at each other going, thank God.
Yeah.
Especially because I had to go to the bathroom. But anyway, and so we finally had enough nerve to go outside the door because the crashing and everything had stopped like about an hour before the sun came up.
See, I would have waited, too, for the crashing to stop and for the sun to come up. Okay, sounds good so far.
Okay, so we decided we'd go outside. And finally, we opened up the door, and we all got out, and I said, you guys get out here, you got to see this. And the other truck was just fine. But around our truck and the camper were these huge boulders in a circle around the camper.
Oh, my God. What, I presume to this day you have no idea what it was.
No, but it had to be something
awfully big.
Awfully big. Because it took us pushing with one truck and pulling with another to get him far enough out of the way so we could get the truck and the camper out.
That's an incredible story. Do you swear that's true?
Oh, yes. And this happened in 1975 because it's when I got out of the service, and all 4 of us got together because we used to go on camping trips when we were in high school. And to this day, when we get together, I mean, this, you know, this is something we always talk about.
You still talk about. I can imagine you would. Well, you know, that one is almost a topper. What an absolutely incredible story. And so that's where it ended. You hauled the rocks away, and that was it.
Yeah, we pushed them out of the way, and we got out of there, and I have never been up there again.
I can't blame you.
I will not go.
Thank you very much for the story. Thank you, sir.
Art.
Take care. Something that big with those kinds of rocks. No, thank you.
Well, one Saturday morning, it was back in 1988. It was 2 weeks before I was going to go out of town. That's how I remember. I started to wake up on a Saturday morning. All of a sudden, this blue light shined. It was like a blue light shine inside of my head.
Inside? Wait a minute. Inside of your head?
Yeah, it's like a TV. All of a sudden, like a TV or an image flickers inside of my head.
Okay.
And then from here, get a load of this. I saw it was like these people, like in a large or a fairly good-sized underground cavern or hallway or room.
Really?
And it was this swath. They were bathed in blue light. There was 4 of them. They were tall. They had like jeweled masks on and robes. And I had the feeling that the ones in the black were women, and their hair was like kind of longish and black. And then the men had gray robes, and their skin was like white, like Mickey Mouse. And it lasted for about 30 seconds. And then from time to time, I think of it, maybe it's symbolic of something or what. But I'll tell you, I was sure startled, but I think subsequently I've told people about it, and they said, well, maybe there's a symbol there. Or
what would you call that, a vision?
I don't know, but for a moment, since then I haven't had something like this, but ironically, I'd been thinking that before I went to sleep, how we can possibly communicate with our ancestors psychically. And I don't know if it's a possibility.
Why do you think they were your ancestors?
Well, I mean, I got to thinking about that subject by coincidental. I don't think that they are, but I got the feeling they're from overseas. I don't know if that's of any importance.
Maybe, all right. Thank you very much. Maybe what happened is you just sort of crossed psychic paths for a few moments with somebody who was doing some kind of experiment somewhere else, or somebody else who was dabbling in areas they perhaps should not have been, and you were simply the receptor for that tampering. Now, that's an absolute stab in the dark for somebody who is simply a talk show host and listened to your story. I don't have the slightest idea what it was. I believe that children, little children, have more of an ability to see, experience, or touch the other side than we do. Now, I wouldn't pretend to be able to tell you why, and there are adult sensitives, certainly, who have either maintained or nurtured that ability to see or reach or talk to the other side. But children in their innocence, I think, have something that the rest of us begin to lose as we get older because of the noise of society, the noise level, the signal-to-noise level, if you will. It was a deep thing that is either in all of us or was once in all of us or is still in all of us that fades. But, in children, it has not yet faded. So children have a unique kind of sensory ability the rest of us do not have.
One time my husband and I had a disagreement, and he had been, just frolicking and carrying on, and I'd about had it. And I was very upset, and my mom told me, well, you need to cool down. And so she said, let's go to this thrift store that happened to be in a hospital. And we were walking down the corridor.
Why is it that when women get upset, they go shopping? It's true, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But anyway, my mom and I were walking down the corridor, and in the hospital, you hear there's like speakers, and there's like, Dr.
Jones.
Dr. Jones wanted an ER, and you really don't pay attention to these things.
That's right.
And anyway, I was upset, and she says, calm down. I said, no, this is it. I am upset. and nothing you can say, Mother, is going to change my mind. She says, well, I really think you need to cool down. I said, well, nope, that's it. At that point, we heard a voice walk by, and it just asked in a real deep voice, where did you leave Ben? And we didn't pay any attention to it until we walked about 2 feet. And then my mom and I looked at each other, and we turned around together, and we saw a tall, almost Frankenstein stature man and a short man. And they both had on those white gowns, and their skin was gray tone. And we both looked at it, and then I kept looking at it, and then the tall guy turns around in like a Frankenstein stance and looks directly into my eyes. And he lifts his head up just a bit, like telling me, I'm going to get you because you're vulnerable, because you can be mine. And then he just turns around and he walks off with the other short guy. And we both looked at them, and their skin tone was like, it was gray, as if they were had been dead for years. And then I looked at my mom, and she looks at me, and she says, "Make the sign of the cross." We both made the sign of the cross. And she says, "Look, when you're this upset with somebody, the evil spirits know that you're vulnerable. And at this point," she says, "you need to cool down, because this is how bad things happen."
Well, I'll bet you if her first speech didn't work, this one did.
Yeah, well, I still haven't forgiven him, but
you did calm down.
Oh yeah, I did calm down. And there are, I just want to tell everybody that there are bad spirits out there.
Yes.
And that when you're being negative and you're vulnerable and you don't have the fear of Christ or something that's more powerful than them, then they can get you. But if you can say a prayer right now and then,
it's a matter of weakness.
It's a matter of like you were saying. It's a matter of weakness, and they'll come right on in, and this is how bad things happen.
It's such a good point. Thank you. First off, in my 35 years, I have never encountered anything of a strange nature before. That is, until just recently. I'll let you decide if this is a ghost story or not. But I'm now convinced. I've been living at an apartment complex for about 2.5 years. I work nights, therefore I sleep in the day. Figures. I do too. After a few months after moving into my apartment, I'd be awakened from a sound sleep by the feeling that someone was in bed with me. It was as though someone was thrashing wildly about the bed. But when I looked at the bed, it was as empty as was the bedroom. This happened every day during the month of September and stopped after September 21st. I thought it was just a sleep disorder. Since it seemed to have disappeared, I soon forgot it. Then, the following September, the same thing happened. And just as before, it stopped after the 21st. I went to my doctor. I discussed it with him, and he gave me some pills. Anyway, last month, it began again, and the pills did not work. As the 21st approached, the thrashing feeling would be more intense and last longer to the point where I could no longer get any sleep. Now, after 2 days of no sleep, I came home from work, and a neighbor who I've been having a passing acquaintance with noticed my haggard look. He asked me if I was sick. I told him that I wasn't getting much sleep lately. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, I told him of my strange tale, but I left out the thing about it only happening during the month of September. Now, this guy has lived at this complex for 15 years, and here's what he told me. Quote, "I often wondered why no one stayed for very long in your unit. Now I think I know. Back in September of 1981, a young lady lived in your apartment, and later that month was found dead on her bed. The autopsy showed that she had been strangled and put up one hell of a fight, end quote. Now I believe the thrashing about my bed is the spirit of this lady. Another thing that's strange is that it only happens during the day, not the night. Therefore, I feel she must have died during the day. What do you think? What should I do? Jim in Phoenix, Arizona. Buddy, I wouldn't begin to try to tell you what to do. I don't know.
Hello, Art.
Hello, where are you?
Austin, Texas.
Austin, welcome.
Yes, I'm calling about a story that if my family finds out I'm telling this, I'm going to be in big trouble, but it occurred in Louisiana about 100 years ago, and it's still occurring to this day.
Oh.
It's a 100-year-old ghost story that occurred originally in Coshada, Louisiana, and I had an aunt and uncle that lived 100 years ago, several generations removed, and they were recently married, and my aunt died shortly after the marriage, and the uncle was completely devastated. And when he was going to bury his wife, she was in her 20s, they hadn't been married for a year, he had the coffin ordered from New Orleans. He wanted a special coffin, he wanted a glass coffin, and he wanted her buried in Metairie Cemetery in New Orleans.
Metairie. Mm-hmm.
And he was told that it would take 6 months for the coffin to be ordered, and so he waited for the coffin to come up to Shreveport, up to his area, and he would keep the corpse upstairs in his house in the bedroom, and according to the servants at the house, he would kiss the corpse every night before he would go to bed.
Oh, boy.
The servant said that he would order them to take the corpse out every day and air the corpse out in a wheelbarrow, and for 6 months. And he had a Ouija board, as you were talking about earlier.
Yes.
A Ouija board. The servant said he would talk to the corpse every night and have conversations. And apparently this was a jealous ghost. And the servants were horrified. They would not clean this room. They said that candles wouldn't light when they went up there. There was cold air. The candles would blow out. They could hear low-level whispers, and they said objects would fall from the room. And at night, they would, after a while, after a certain point, they would hear conversations between my uncle and
the
some
corpse.
other voice.
Some other voice, the corpse, I presume. Oh, my God.
And as I say, no one would go into this room for many years. Eventually, the glass coffin did arrive. They did bury her in Metairie Cemetery in New Orleans. She's still there to this day in a crypt. And
did that end it?
No, because up until the 1970s, all of my relatives who would go to visit this house would not visit that room. They still said that cold area was still there. They could still feel the presence. I remember going there as a child with my aunt. My aunt had shaky legs; she wouldn't even walk up the stairs. They could hear the squeaky wheels of the wheelbarrow at night of the wheelbarrow that was supposed to air out the corpse. They could still hear that in the 1960s and 70s. And there was a portrait that they couldn't photograph.
Is this something that your family will not talk about?
It's not something that they're proud of. There is, but it is something that everyone knows about. And there is a certain member in the family who is a keeper of the key to the crypt, who does have a key to the.
Would you go in there?
Yeah, I guess I would. Just out of curiosity, because it's been something I've heard about all my life, and I'm curious about it.
All right. Well, I listen. I very much appreciate your call, but there's no way that I would. There's no way. Absolutely no way. Now, you tell me, you explain to me, but that man is just like the women in the low-cut dresses who, the moment you hear the bump and the grind in the basement, immediately do what? They go down the stairs to the basement, the one place where you know they ought not go. Everybody knows evil things lurk in dark basements, but they go straight down there. And see, if that fellow had the key, where would he go? He'd go look at the body. I know he would. I wouldn't. Would you?